The following episode of History Town was brought to you by...
It's 1862. You are hand-digging through layers of frustrating gravel, hoping and praying the next shovel stroke will expose a fortune in gold. Everyone says it's crazy, but there's too much at stake. Then, just when the outcome seems impossibly bleak, the ground begins to pay. The lead is struck, and the greatest creekside placer gold deposit the world has ever seen is suddenly yours for the taking. This is Barkerville's story.
For more information, visit barkerville.ca. Barkerville, a National Historic Site of Canada.
You found History Town.
You found History
You
Town.
found History Town.
You found History Town.
Hey, you found History Town. Nice one.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to History Town. I am your host. My name is Matthew Quick. And before we begin to this week's episode, we'll be talking with the lovely Amy Newman and having a little discussion with the manager of visitor experiences in Barkerville, James Douglas. I just want to say that History Town is a listener-supported podcast. So that means that if you could like, share, retweet, post on Facebook, whatever you can do to help get the word out, that'd be very appreciated if you like what you hear. Also, if you would like to be a guest on History Town, or you'd like to talk about History Town, feel free to give us a shout at matt@historytown.ca, also James Douglas at james@historytown.ca, and if you have any advertising questions, feel free to give a shout at Dirk at historytown.ca. That's myself, James Douglas, and Dirk Van Stralen, who are all responsible for producing History Town week after week. Now that I have the business end of the podcast completed, let's check in with James Douglas in beautiful Barkerville. James, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, I know this morning, we shouldn't be dating ourselves, but I'm going to date yourselves. You had two things that came up that I was like, we have to talk about that on the podcast. One is you had the interpreter photo, which
That's right.
I think if you went into the actual, the curatorial, is that where the old photos are kept? Or, But how many years has that photo been taking place? Because I have 4 years of photos, but I mean, the getting everybody together to take a photo, it's like a slice of history itself of interpreters in Barkerville.
Oh, it really is, and it's fascinating to look at all of them. To be perfectly honest, I don't know when the tradition started. It was sometime probably in the late 80s, maybe early 90s. But Leif and Eva Grandel, who are some local photographers who live in the new Barkerville area, so the little space that's between Wells and Barkerville, there's an area called New Barkerville up Reduction Road, and that was where in the late 50s, early 60s, when a lot of the old-timers who lived in Barkerville were moving out of what had become the protected park, and then were moving into a new area. They called this place New Barkerville. So some of the residents there are some of the more interesting people, actually, in the entire area.
Amen to
that. Leif and Eva, originally from Sweden. They came over 20, maybe even close to 30 years ago now, and started a photography business in Quesnel that has done quite well. So every year they've come out and very graciously wrangled all of our 20 to 30 historical interpreters that we might have on site at any one time, including the Teamsters. So the horses are in the photo as well. The folks from the Theatre Royal come. Everybody gets up a little bit earlier than they normally would, gets into costume a little bit earlier than they normally would, and then we find some significant site. So each year that we do the photograph, we try to do it in a different place, so that the backdrop is always changing as well.
Where was it this year?
So this year, actually, for the very first time, we did it in front of the Masonic Hall.
Oh.
So Caribou Lodge number 4. So we all lined up on the boardwalk in front of there, brought the horses out, and took a couple of serious photos, a couple of smiling photos, and a couple of absolutely ridiculous photos. And then Barkerville, the photographers select the best serious and the best silly photo of the collection, and then Barkerville provides a copy of each of them to our interpreters so that they will remember us from year to year and look back on us fondly, hopefully, in a generation to come.
Also, I was thinking about the other day is because of Facebook, you can do on this day, a little feature. And so it shows you like clips of what you did that day. And there was one photo of me and Richard, and I think I was promoting that I was coming to the Theatre Royal. And I had a picture of me and Richard who were in the Methodist church doing a Christmas show.
Mm.
And that sort of piqued my interest because that's something that I know that you guys continue on Barkerville with Halloween and Christmas traditions, and even end of September you have your murder mystery steampunk, which if you haven't been or seen the photos, it is amazing of the people that come out for that and how much care. And it's like a Comic Con, in quotations. It's like BarkaCon, I guess is the best way to put it. But so I guess what I'm asking is, what do you have? So Barkerville, we are a month away from Barkerville. At, it's not closed because it's always open. So would that be the
Yes.
end of season? Is September 26th, 27th?
Yeah, so pardon me, it's the 25th this year.
Okay.
So basically, the way that Barkerville has been broken up in the past, as far as the scheduling is concerned, is that we have what we call a spring and fall shoulder season, and that's the sort of May leading up into mid-June. The school program falls into that spring season. Then we have our regular summer programming season, which is the third weekend in June, straight through till Labor Day, and then we roll into the fall, what we call the shoulder season, which is a tourism industry term. And so that we finish out September. So we always begin our season the Thursday before the long weekend in May, and we end the main season on the last Sunday in September. So that incorporates the spring and fall shoulder seasons plus the summer season. Now, from this point forward, we're going to take that entire time frame and just call it our summer season. And that's because for the very first time, Barkerville will be piloting some fall and winter activities that we're then going to call our activities season. So once the main summer season ends on the last Sunday of September, we will roll into our activities season, which will incorporate October, November, December, straight through until when we open up again in May. And we're going to do a number of really cool things. Now, like you said, we always like to end the summer season with our, what is now the Steampunk Murder Mystery, which we've done for the past 3 years. It's called Out of Time. And that actually originated through a very much like a BarkerCon. And by that I mean a convention. 2 years previous to that, we held in September an event called Lost in Time, and that was the brainchild of a woman named Fairlith Harvey, who was my special events coordinator at the time. She also runs a very successful geek-themed theater company in the Lower Mainland called Geekenders, where they do a lot of
Oh, right.
science fiction and comic-based burlesque, nerdlesque, I think they call it.
Nerdlesque.
They do.
Because they're doing the Empire
Yeah, they've done a
Strikes
bunch of
Back
Star Wars
and
shows.
Star Wars, yeah.
Yes, they did a Nude Hope. A Nude Hope is what they called it. The Empire Strips Back. And
What's Jedi?
I can't remember what the Return of the Jedi was, but yeah, I can't remember what it was. But they just recently did The Force is Shaken, which is their Force Awaken parody, that did extremely well. They usually launch those at the Rio Theater in Vancouver. So she's always been really dialed into the whole geek culture. I've always been pretty interested in that too. So she approached me and said, "Hey, why don't we do like a mini convention, and I'll bring up some of my crew from Vancouver, and we'll host a very different view of Barkerville on the last weekend." So we did that for 2 years. The second year, in fact, we even brought in some celebrities. Denise Crosby, who played Tasha Yar on Star Trek The Next Generation.
Wow, okay.
We got a bit of sponsorship money, and she very graciously came to Barkerville, along with a woman named Claudia Christian, who, if you've seen Babylon 5,
Okay.
which was sort of a Deep Space Nine-like show that was out at the same time. In fact, there is good reason to suspect that Star Trek Deep Space Nine ripped off its entire premise from Babylon 5. Claudia Christian was one of the stars of that. And then a fellow named Dean Hagland, who was one of the lone gunmen on the X-Files.
Oh!
You remember those? Yeah, you know those guys,
Yeah,
right?
and it's funny, Kate, who was an interpreter in Barkerville in 2005, her father was one of the lone gunmen as well.
That's right. Yes, I knew that. Kate Braidwood.
Braidwood, that's it.
Yeah. So then, after we decided not to do the sort of traditional Lost in Time event, we morphed that into a steampunk murder mystery. I'd had a lot of experience producing interactive murder mysteries all around the province in different cities that I'd been in, so it seemed like a bit of a no-brainer. And we'd already done a few of them in Wells. We had a little company called Who Done It in Wells. So it seemed like a natural fit. And because so many of the people who were coming to our Geek Weekend were already dressing in steampunk attire, that sort of mixture of H.G. Wells science fiction and traditional Victoriana, it seemed like a really good fit, and it was. People have really responded to it. This is our third year. This year we're doing a Batman steampunk theme, so
Nice.
it's like Gotham by gaslight kind of thing. So it's going to be great. It'll be a great way to blow out the main sort of summer season, let everybody let their hair down a little bit, and interact with Barkerville in a completely different way. But then right away we're jumping into our like conference and retreat season. So immediately following the close of our summer season, we've got a large social studies conference that's going to be happening here with a lot of the local and regional teachers, speaking specifically about our school program and the resources that we have and how we can help bring them out on field trips, and what kind of things we can do to make their jobs easier, and then what kind of things do they want to see, as well as some great professional development learning opportunities for them. So we'll be doing that the following week. The week after that, a fellow by the name of T.J. Daw, who is a bit of a wunderkind on the Canadian Fringe Festival theater scene. He travels all around the world. He's a monologuist primarily, but an actor, somebody that I went to school with a number of years ago. He's going to come up and host a writer's retreat for the entire first week of October. So a maximum of 15 students, where we want to make it as one-on-one sort of mentorship as possible. But here's a guy who has won awards for his writing. He's produced more than 50 shows that have toured across Canada. He loves Barkerville and Wells and was really interested in having sort of an immersive, away from the madding crowd experience with some of his students. He already teaches at Langara College in Vancouver, and knew that there was some students that probably would be very interested in sort of this kind of immersive retreat environment. So we're going to do that in the first week of October.
And how do people book into that?
The best way is just simply to go to our website, barkerville.ca.
Okay, perfect.
And then go to the activities column, and then, or rather button, and a column will come down and it'll say retreats down at the bottom. Or if you can remember, just go to barkerville.ca/Wright, WRITE, and that'll take you directly to the Shut Up and Write page. That's what the retreat is called, Shut Up and Write. And then October then becomes about Halloween. This year we're going to pilot a couple of things in the weekends leading up to Halloween, but we always have a fairly raucous Halloween event here on the night in question. About 400 or 500 people come to do a ghostly town tour of Barkerville, and we set up one of the houses, which just ironically happens to be called the Blair House.
Oh.
So we have sort of the Blair Witch House, or the Blair House of Horror is what we call it. And have a really great, and then fireworks at the end of the night. And then this year, immediately following Halloween, we're moving into and continuing the construction of a 200-foot vertical magic carpet lift that's going to go up in behind the Barkerville Cameronton Cemetery, right up the side of the valley. And the idea, what a magic carpet lift is, it's basically a human conveyor belt. And it's a new form of ski lift for smaller hills. So unlike a traditional rope tow or a T-bar or something like that, this is actually a moving floor. So you can bring things like inner tubes. So we'll have inner tubes for rent and snowshoes, that sort of thing. You can jump on the bottom of the magic carpet. It'll take you up the vertical to the top end. We'll have at least 3, maybe 4 fully developed, groomed tubing runs that'll allow people to come sliding down the hill right by the Shamrock dump, in between the two, what is currently the RV parking lot and the main parking lot, but we'll have the run out there so that people will slow down as they come through. As I said, we'll rent snowshoes, so if people want to take the lift up to the ridge and then snowshoe along. We have a whole fleet of Norwegian kick sleds that are being built for us in Quesnel by one of the woodworking classes there. And imagine a dogless dog sled is basically what it looks like.
Okay, I was going to say,
it's got
what's a kick sled?
It's got runners on the bottom. You could put bags on the front if you want, but you literally just kick along the ground. And we had a first version, sort of a pilot one that was built for us last winter. So all of us here in the office took turns kicking it around the town, and it's an amazing way to see Barkerville. And it's fairly quick. It doesn't take a lot of physical effort. I mean, if you're going up hills, obviously there's a little bit of extra kicking that has to happen, but it's a pretty interesting tool. So we'll have those for rent as well, and we're just going to expand. We're building a new indoor-outdoor shelter right now that has a concrete slab in the bottom that was engineered so that it can become a small skating rink. So right inside the park, when you first get here, there'll be a small skating rink for families to come and enjoy. Ultimately, we're hoping to have a portable, full-sized, regulation hockey rink that we'll put out in the recreational vehicle parking lot, so people can come and do shinny games and that kind of stuff as well. We just want to be able to provide more services and activities to the winter crowd that is already coming to the Wells Barkerville area. There's a large snowmobile community that comes up here in the winter. There's some avid cross-country skiers and snowshoers. Troll Ski Resort is only about 25 minutes away. It's a great mom and pop operation, but it's a 16-run beautiful hill. So there's some great downhill skiing in the area. This will just be sort of one more piece of the wintertime puzzle, and we'll have a gift shop in the visitor reception center that's open all year round, as well as sort of a soup and sandwich kitchen. So if people want to have a bite to eat while they're out here, those kind of amenities, which is a first. This is a first for Barkerville. Barkerville has traditionally been known as, like the mining season, you've got that 5-month window between May and September where there's activity, and then everything slows down in the winter. And we want to make sure that we get the message out that there's going to be lots to do 12 months out of the year.
And it's, I mean, if you haven't done the drive from Quesnel to Wells during the winter, it is beautiful. There's plenty of places to pull over and take photos. I mean, it's that, especially that Cottonwood onward. It's quite nice, and the roads are maintained well. Like, that's the one thing I've always noticed, and I've never had any problems driving unless it's been like at 3 a.m. coming in when the snow just happens. But by 6 a.m. they're out there plowing and sanding and making sure people can come. So it's beautiful. Yeah, no, it's quite the trek to make, that's for sure.
It is a very safe road, and that's something that's one of the things that I want to get the word out about, because I think that is one of the things that keeps people back in the wintertime, is they think, oh, well, that road's kind of windy and it does go up in elevation. But like you say, it's really well maintained. Yeah. And there's an outfit here in Wells that operates the snowplow, and then there's also one on the Quesnel side, and they meet in the center basically at Cottonwood. So as soon as there's a skiff of snow on the ground, you've got four, but like two sets of two plows that are going in either direction. So it gets cleaned off really quickly.
Well, the Christmas, that's a lot going on, James. Like, that's a full plate. And I mean, and that's what makes me happy. I mean, I always say it, and it may seem funny, but the stuff that's been happening every year, there's always something new. There's always something that's being added to Barkerville's and just getting stronger. Yeah, it's just great. It's great to hear, because I just wrote down a list of everything you were doing. I remember, I mean, 9 years ago, it was Halloween and Christmas sleigh rides, and they had the snowmobilers, and there was things maintained, but it was never on it was never that big. I mean, it was on a scale of, there's things there, but you have to sort of make it your own. This providing for people is fantastic. Being able to bring your family up to go skating, or to go tobogganing or sledding, or if dad wants to go snowmobiling, or if mom wants to go snowmobiling, and then you have the kids being entertained, like, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Well, and to be perfectly clear, I mean, we are enjoying an opportunity to see come to fruition a lot of plans that have been in the works for 20 years. So like, those people who were here a decade ago, it's not like they didn't understand what was needed. I think it was a lot of their ideas and a lot of the lobbying that was going on, not only from the people who were working here at Barkerville, but in the Wells area, the Trails Society, and the outdoor rec stuff that was happening in the winter. I can't stress enough, the early work that was being done by those groups to try and position Wells and Barkerville to a place, get us to a place where, once things aligned properly and the proper resourcing was in, when the right kind of administrator was in to sort of, kind of connect some of these dots, we're now seeing what appears to be a very rapid progression. And I'm really, really pleased to be a part of the team that is making some of this stuff happen. But I will certainly say that we couldn't have done it, and we can't continue to do it if it weren't for the early work of the people that came before us.
And you mentioned the Trail Society. Is there any other groups in town? Like there's a Snowmobile Society that you're. Maybe I don't know where I'm going with this. Is there anybody group that you want to give acknowledgement to on tack on?
Well, the Wells and Area Community Association is doing a tremendous amount to create opportunities for families to be able to be here in the city, or rather in the town of Wells and the district area, and do work like this. So, for example, the Community Association has been particularly strong in the last few years and got a daycare up and running here in Wells, which means that both parents have an opportunity to work in the summer when there is opportunities to work. It then provides some after-school daycare opportunities in the fall and winter as well. So I can't tell you how important. I'm a father of two 7-year-old children, and my wife works in the summertime as well. Without there being access to some sort of daycare or day camp, as we did this summer, being in a place like Wells, which is relatively off the beaten track, can be very difficult for families because you just don't have access to the kind of childcare that you would in the city. So to have the community association so strongly come on board with that and create a space for us in the school. So, we have to thank the District of Wells itself that owns our school and operates it as a community school to give us the opportunity to have a daycare there. So there's definitely that. The Trail Society has been huge for us. Island Mountain Arts and the constant work that they have done since 1977 with their Summer School of the Arts to bring interested folks to this region, folks who then ultimately benefit Barkerville and get some benefit from Barkerville for sure. The Legion in town. I mean, to be perfectly honest, there are so many.
Yeah.
I'm a director of the Wells Historical Society too, so I would love to be able to mention them. For a town that has less than 300 people year-round in the population, it is amazing to see how many charitable and community organizations not only exist in this community, but thrive in this community, all based on volunteer hours. It's remarkable.
That's amazing.
Actually.
When my grandfather was a Mason, when he passed away, my grandmother, because in Newfoundland you had to pay for all your books and all your school supplies, obviously your school supplies, but even your textbooks you had to pay for. That she would buy all the books and she'd bring the receipt into the Masonic Lodge, and they would pay for my dad's education and all his sister's education until they were out of school, and even when they were going to nursing, they would take care of their books, which I was like, wow, I was sort of not blown away, because I know it's a very heavy-handed charitable, but it was something that my dad was like. But yeah, he was like, yeah, grandfather, they took care of us. He's like, that was it, like, so yeah.
They're an important organization. Again, full disclosure, I am a Mason, so I do have some affinity towards the work that gets done in the community. But to be perfectly honest, that's one of the reasons that I joined the organization, was because I had witnessed for years the kind of good that that particular group of gentlemen anyway was doing in our community. And that comes right down to educational scholarship. There's what we call the Harold Turner Bursary that's given out to the grade 7 students who are graduating from the Wells Barkerville School and going on to either homeschool or to school in Quesnel. And there is bursary money that's given to every grade 7 student that leaves the Wells Barkerville School on behalf of the Masons.
Wow.
To help with that higher education for sure.
That's pretty amazing. Well, I mean, we could talk forever. I know. That's sort of the one thing, and that's why a lot of people, when they talk to me, they're just like, I really like you and James. It's like you guys always continue a good conversation from the last week, or sometimes you're on something else. I'm like, well, that's the fun of it. We're just going to keep talking, and next week we'll have a different subject that we'll just get ourselves into. It's sort of whatever we lock our eyes on to, whatever that week, we'll just sort of chatting about. And I'm glad this week we can talk about the off season, or not the off season, but the activity season, because that is something that I think as we approach September 25th, is for everybody to know that it still continues. It's not a ghost town or any of those other words that you hear. It's still a pretty vibrant community. And Wells, even Wells during the wintertime, is a pretty amazing community to visit, just because of the snow backdrops. If you're a photographer or an artist or a writer, and coming to Wells is pretty inspirational. Um, so I want to thank you, James, and thank you for your taking time. And I want to say you have yourself a great day.
Thanks, you too, Matt, and I look forward to talking with you again next
We'll
week.
see you next week. Always great catching up with James Douglas. Now, before we begin our interview with Amy Newman, we'd like to hear a word from our sponsor.
So, if you lived in the 1870s and had the misfortune of being caught committing a crime in Barkerville right after the judge had left town, you could rest secure in the knowledge that you would be languishing in jail until the judge returned the following year. And your trial would happen in one day. Swift justice. Visit Barkerville.
For more information, visit barkerville.ca. Barkerville, a National Historic Site of Canada.
This week's guest, we have the very energetic and, quite frankly, positive Amy Newman of Newman and Wright Theatrical Company. You can read more about Amy, and she performs in the Theatre Royal all summer long and in September. You can find out more information at theatreroyal.ca. Also, her documentary that she does with Richard Wright at bonepicker.ca. Every week, as we get to know these people that work in Barkerville, when I began the interview with Amy Newman, I realized that there's one element that I never take a factor of is family. The family of everyone that supports someone to achieve their goals. Amy's goal was always to be an actress. And at times she had struggles, but find herself very successful. And I think that's the most amazing part of Amy's story. Is all this time she never loses sight of her family and how important her mom and dad meant to her. So it's a fun interview. We discussed many things. We've known each other for 12 years. It's quite a fun sit down. So without any further ado, here's Amy Newman. Hey Amy, how are you doing?
I'm awesome, Matt. How are you?
That's great. I'm doing great. So
Oh,
Amy, before I start every episode, I always like to tell a story just so people know how I know you. Some people I
okay.
know very well, some people I know a little. Me and you have known each other for it's going on since 2004. I've known you.
Yeah,
So 12
yeah,
years, and
I
some
know.
pretty in-depth, intense years in there from
Yep,
2007 to 2010,
yep,
as
absolutely.
your right hand. Not WRIGHT, R I G
The other
H
one.
T. And where
Yeah,
that's important is that you are one of Newman and Wright. You are the Newman in the Newman Wright Theatrical Company at Barkerville Historic Town and Park. I met you
yeah.
when we started working together in 2007. And
Mm-hmm.
you had this one woman show called, do you remember 2007? It was the one about she had to make the journey and
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
fell.
absolutely. That was Bernadette's
What's
Gold Rush Escape.
Was that
Yeah,
was it Gold Rush Escape or was it Bernadette's Gold Rush
yeah,
Escape?
Gold Rush. Well, I think it
Gold
said
Rush.
one thing on the poster and one thing on the program. Never did get that
I
right.
wonder who's. Well, it's that could have been that could have been a me job. So let's just say it was intended that
Let's
way.
just let it go.
Yeah. So we would every day, me and you would walk when we close up the theater, and we'd walk to our vehicles, and we would engage in conversation about the play or about anything. And I cherish those walks together because that's when we knew each other, but I worked pretty hard with Richard, and you were so busy with rehearsals.
Yeah,
Me and you never really got much of a chance to talk, but except for those
yeah.
Thursdays at 8 o'clock,
Hmm.
we'd walk to our vehicles and we would just talk about anything. And then sometimes we'd sit next to our vehicles and talk for another hour, just chatting about uh,
Yeah.
anything. And I really cherish those moments because I got to know you quite well there. And
Hmm. Yeah,
I think we formed a friendship there, and that's where I think it always started for us.
absolutely.
Um,
Hmm.
so I think the best place to start is you were born on Salt Spring Island, correct? Or were you born in America?
I was born in Southern California.
Southern,
Yep.
which part of Southern California?
I was born in a little town. Well, it's not a little town anymore. It was a smallish town at that time called Garden Grove, about 5 minutes away from Disneyland.
Your father was a musician, correct? Mom a
Yeah,
musician?
actually, my mom and dad were both musicians. Yeah, for many, many, many years, and they were Los Angeles born and raised. A number of things were happening all at the same time in the middle '60s. Obviously, the Vietnam War stuff was going on, and I had two older brothers. My mom and dad were pacifists and did not want them to be drafted to be going to war. So that was one thing that was going on. The second thing was that we used to love going camping. And one time on a camping trip, we met a Vancouver family, Vancouver, BC family. We'd never been to Canada before. And their son and my sister fell in love on a camping trip because we just happened to be at this campground. Did I ever tell you this story? I don't know.
No.
Anyway,
No, you
this
have
place
never.
called a great state park in Southern California called Pismo Beach. Beautiful, beautiful park. Has a great history for this family, for our family. And yeah, so we met this Canadian family, and my sister Wendy, who was, get this, 12 at the time, met this young teenage boy Lee Keeping, who was 15. And at the end of the day of all of us playing together and stuff, he said to his mom, "I'm going to marry that girl."
Wow.
And they did. Yeah. Yeah. Just a few years later. So, I mean, so that happened. And then all this war stuff was going on. Plus, my mom and dad, the town we were in, Garden Grove, was becoming a metropolis. And mom and dad were just thinking, we should just get out. We should leave. And they were at their midlife and wanted to do something different. And so they had also read a book about the Gulf Islands, and it sounded like paradise. So we and I mean, this is, very compressed. Lee and Wendy got married. My older brother got married. And before you knew it, all of us in 1970 were going in this massive caravan, leaving California to come to a little tiny island, Salt Spring Island, as different from Southern California as you can possibly imagine.
Were your parents thinking like some kind of Partridge Family band where you're like, let's tour across Canada and let's have all the kids play
Well,
music? Or was it just like the kids will discover what they discover?
no, it was very much the reverse. I mean, you should have seen the big caravan, this great big old green Ford truck that my dad bought for us to put all our belongings in. He actually stenciled, or maybe mom did it. That sounds like a mom thing. Anyway, stenciled 5 little people on it and 2 parents. So it was sort of like the Partridge
Yeah.
Family. But and in fact, in California, we were raised because we had music and theater in our lives from like the day we were born. I mean, mom was always doing little shows with us, all 5 of us, around Southern California. And so then when we came to Canada, we just continued. I mean, imagine my mom and dad moving to Salt Spring Island. They don't know anything about this, and within 6 months, they've read books about the history of the island and were putting on shows there and telling the history of Salt Spring to people who already lived there. Mom and dad had a lot of chutzpah, I'll tell you that.
No kidding. Did they? Your parents were always involved in community theater, correct? Or were they? So when did you start acting? When you were a child? Like, did you start pretty
Oh,
young?
this is good, actually. Yeah. Well, I do remember that at the age of about 5, I'd already been in some shows that, as I mentioned, that my mom would organize in California. And I do remember at 5 saying to her, "I'm not doing this anymore. I quit. I'm not doing it. I hate it." That was at 5. So I retired for a few years. And then we came to Canada, came to Salt Spring and started putting on shows. And then I was like right back in. And then by the time I was about 12, I was totally solidly into any like school plays or shows that mom and dad were organizing, community shows. I would just do everything I could get my teeth on. And I knew right then, like, there was no doubt I was going to be an actor. I was going to be a performer. There was never any doubt about that.
Did you pursue any post-secondary or post-after high school, any theatrical training, or did you go to any schools? Like after high school, what were your plans?
Yeah, I did actually, Matt. I did go to UVic and went to the Department of Theater there. And that was mostly just because it was the closest to Salt Spring. I'd gotten a couple of scholarships to take drama, and yeah, that was my plan, was to get, to get a theater degree and take Vancouver by storm or something like that. Um, the funny thing, yeah, haha. The funny thing was that I actually I guess I was just too impatient, I just wanted it all so badly, just so badly I could taste it, right? So after, like about a year or so of UVic, I was like, nah, you know what? I didn't want to do it. I want to just move to Vancouver and just start auditioning. So that's what I did.
See,
So I was kind of undertrained to start with, but then I continued to get training over the years. I did a lot of private lessons, like private singing lessons. And then I also went to the Banff Center in the 80s, like when I was a young and up and coming. There was no CCPA, there was no CAP College, CAP University. So the Banff Center musical theater programs were the most prestigious places to go to train. So I went there a few times and did training.
now you
But
also we can't ignore this because it's one of my favorites, and you may get mad at me for bringing this up, but you were in a
I'm
little
not
known
gonna.
show called Airwolf
Oh gosh.
1985, and you portrayed a Russian ballerina who
Actually,
was
no, a Russian pianist, a piano player of Russian descent. Yeah, yeah, I had to play
oh
the
my
piano. Oh yeah, I had
well,
this audition. Oh my gosh, Matt. Yeah,
I want to hear
God,
it. I
it
want to
was
hear that story. I mean,
okay.
it's
Yeah,
History
it's a good
Town, but
story.
whatever. It's Airwolf is history.
Yeah, Airwolf 3 or Airwolf 2 or something. Yeah. Well, in the mid 80s, Vancouver film and TV was just, burgeoning, just opening up, exploding, right? So, I had an agent at the time, and I got sent out to this audition to play I was actually supposed to be, I don't even know if it was Russian, I don't know, some kind of Eastern European. And I'd never done those accents, but I'm pretty good with accents. So I had a friend who did do a Russian accent. So I went to his house and he taught me how to do it in a night. And then a couple days later, I went to the audition and bagged the part, which was great. So I was named Tanya, and I was in this refugee camp, and it was so terrible. And the script was, oh, it was horrible. And then we got saved by the guys in the helicopter and the whole. But actually, the interesting
I,
thing about what?
no, go, go,
The
go, go,
interesting
go.
thing was that we were filming. We were the last shoot that ever happened at the old BC Pen. So historically, it's kind of interesting because, of course, now it's all condos and restaurants, and it's like that's on top of where a prison was, which is a little weird to me
Hmm.
when I drive past it. But we were in there as it was the BC Pen, and they'd actually held off on the like destruction of it so that we could film in there. And it was actually, even though it was, I mean, let's say this, I was obviously delighted to get work. I was thrilled to get to
Totally.
bag a big part on a show. The script was what it was. You know, I got to say something like, "Yeah, she died like a bird. She's dead, but I don't know some." No, I know it was the KGB takes your soul. It was great. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Anyway, my big claim to fame. But yeah, but then it was around that time that then as a young actor, and I bagged a few more things in that year, and then nothing. And you sort of think, oh, my star is rising. This is going to be it, and then nothing. And
What
every
was that
actor
like?
is rotten. You just feel like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm crap here. So I kind of realized that I had to do some other stuff. Yeah, so I joined my sister Sue and her husband's band for a while, and then went back to Banff, and then I got a regular job
What was the regular job?
at a garden center. I got interested in horticulture and completely changed my life because after getting rejected so many times, I decided at the age of 24 that I was quitting show business. I never wanted to sing again, and I was serious. I was serious about it. I was never going to do it again.
Was there a moment when you were at 24 going like, well, I'll have this job, and then I'll move up through the ranks and become the manager, and then maybe was there any thought of starting a family or anything like that ever crossed your mind when you were happening this?
No, No, it's funny, Matt. As you know, I came from a big family. I'm a niece,
Hmm.
like, oh, I don't know, I've lost count, like 12 times now. I became an aunt, or an aunt. I'm sorry, became an aunt when I was 7. So I've some of my nieces and nephews are in the same generation I am, which is kind of funny and neat. Um, no, so I never thought about having a family. It just didn't. I didn't really ever want to have children. I've been in a few different relationships, and funnily enough, each man that I've been with has already had children, which is actually fascinating.
Really?
Yeah, really quite fascinating. So that just happened like that, but it's an interesting thing. But and then as far as I think you were asking maybe about with career or with working at this other
Yeah.
job, I did it for 12 years, man. Oh man. Um, and then but yeah, I never thought to myself, oh, I want to be a manager here or anything. It just was a different part of my life, and I was with another guy at that time, and we're pursuing a different avenue. I became
Well,
really
it's
interested in gardening, and that was my art, if you want to call it that.
uh,
You
well,
know,
of course.
you know.
I remember when I was when I was a youth worker. I went to about 3 years in. I became like really just focused on how come I'm not happy anymore.
Right.
And I talked to
Hmm.
this one counselor, and she just said, like to focus so hard on this one career,
Mm.
you amputated a part of your life that you just felt you couldn't have anymore.
Right.
And that was your arts, your entertainment, this
Right.
side that you just gave, because she's like, what you told me about your life, you went
Yeah.
and just went, now I'm going to become this.
Yeah. 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 Yep.
But you get these like ghost pains
Yes.
of art, and like you see a play, and I didn't want to go see plays, like it hurt. Like, did
Mm-hmm.
you feel that way? Did you feel like, I
Yes.
just don't want to,
Yep.
I just don't want to
Absolutely.
go? And you,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. For a while I did. It's really interesting, Matt. For a while I did. I actually sort of extricated myself. I was like, not only, okay, I'm not going to be in the business. I'm not going to be in the business. That's it. Um, but but interestingly enough, for me at least, Matt, as the years went by, my good old mom, my mom and dad, who were just, they were always supporting me no matter what I did. And my mom at one point said to me, Amy, this is after I'd kind of been out of it for a little while. She said, do you want to take some singing lessons? I'll pay for some singing lessons if you want to do that, which was pretty great. And
Yeah,
so I
moms are
said,
good like that.
yeah. And I said, yes, I would. So I went and started getting some training, and I was still working at my other regular, job, doing the making money come in, and living out in the Fraser Valley and having my garden and all that. And then the world started to sort of come together, in that I was doing getting the money from the regular Joe job stuff. Although, yeah, yeah, and and then starting to audition for a few things and starting to get some parts again. And so that was really, really, I felt that theater was coming back to me, and my show business life was coming back. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't survive that. It was just not, I guess it wasn't meant to be. Yeah. So I left and began a career in theater, more or less full time. And that's basically when Barkerville came along. Quite a segue. How would you say?
Quite a segue indeed, Amy Newman, and we'll be right back talking more with her about her return to Barkerville. However, first, here's a word from our sponsor.
When you visit Barkerville Historic Town, you can step into the past and live a present that harkens to a future where the past and present poetically coexist. You'll know this is true when you visit any of our merchants, and you can feast your wallet upon the latest household wares from the 1870s, and then discreetly pay for them with your debit and credit cards. Visit Barkerville. The old is new is old again.
For more information, visit barkerville.ca. Barkerville, a National Historic Site of Canada.
We pick right back up with Amy Newman, where we discuss her return to theater, the origins of the Newman and Wright Theatrical Company, also family. So let's listen back in. It's a great time. Yeah, and I would say first, so when you started getting back into it, did
Hmm.
you feel any rust at all? Did you feel like your
Oh
voice,
yeah.
like I know.
Oh yeah.
And what about confidence too? Because there's like
Yep.
all these factors of like when you have
Yeah.
momentum going,
Yep.
Like, when did you feel like I got the momentum going? And then let's lead into the Wells Casino, because I think
Yeah. Sure.
let's connect those two pieces.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Matt, because again, it has to go back to mom and dad because here I was out in the Fraser Valley doing my kind of garden center, living with the guy, doing this other life that was very separate. And my mom and dad were on Salt Spring and they were retired by then and they were doing shows. They were just putting together shows they wanted to do, like basically musical reviews. And I wasn't part of it at all. I mean, I was living, reasonable distance away, and then my mom and dad phoned me one night and said, "Oh, one of the women who's going to be in this show with us can't do it. Would you like to be in this show with us?" And I went, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, I haven't done any shows for whatever it was, 3 years. It wasn't really that long, but seemed like an eternity." But I said yes. And so I remember when I went back, so I was sort of basically commuting from the Fraser Valley over to Salt Spring to do this show with my mom and dad. And just like I say, a musical review where we sat around and pitched ideas and said, let's do a show. And we can rent a little hall and do a show and some people will come. We'll have a good time. And, but in my case, I just jumped into the show they'd already got going. And it was a musical review of a composer named Harold Arlen, who wrote great stuff like The Wizard of Oz and that old Black Magic, some great old tunes. So I jumped into the show, and when I had the mic in my hand for the first time, Matt, I was very scared. Absolutely super scared because I had not really been on a stage for a few years, and I felt quite rusty, totally. And anyway, then fast forward to once I did that.
Now,
Yeah.
how did you hear about Wells and the Wells Casino?
Okay, well, Barkerville
Like,
actually came first, Matt. Barkerville was before the
What do you-
casino because
what do
I
you
worked
mean?
for Pat and
What do
Mikey.
you mean, Barker?
Yeah,
No,
I did Theater
what?
Royal. Yeah, did you not know that?
When? No, come on. What year was that?
1999. 99.
So 1999, you were in Barkerville? How did you first meet? How did you first hear about Barkerville?
Well, that's actually kind of funny. Is I had a really good friend that I knew when I lived. There was a period of time I was living out in Mission and doing some shows out there, and I had a girlfriend who had been who had spent a lot of time in Quesnel and knew about Barkerville, and she wanted to audition for the Theater Royal. So she told me about the auditions. She said, "Oh, Amy, you'd be so perfect for the theater out at Barkerville, and I want to do it too. Let's both audition." She was actually only 20 at the time, and I was 36. But I bagged it, and she didn't, which is I
Oh,
just
it's
felt kind
always
of
the
bad about
way.
that. But I just felt like I'd come home. I walked in that room. That's when I first met Pat and Mikey and Ross and Brad and oh, I can remember they said that my audition was like I was like a chainsaw. Unstoppable. And I've been told that I had enough energy to light a city. So
I would say
So-
that if there's one quality about you yourself that I could say is that you are very energetic, especially when you get yourself onto a subject. So when you first arrived into Barkerville and walked on that stage, what were
Mm.
your thoughts?
Well, actually, my life always seems so complicated. But I will say, I was full of joy, Matt. Felt like, wow, this is amazing. This is where I'm supposed to be. But I also have to say, to do a complete story, that I was I was grieving because my dad had just died 10 days
Mm.
before I came to Barkerville. So it was a rather traumatic time, a very dramatic and traumatic time for me. In fact, I even phoned Pat, my Pat Taylor, my boss, right after right after I'd signed my contract virtually, because Dad had died, and so I phoned her just to say this has happened, and I didn't really know what to say because I didn't want to let her down, but it was just anyway. We chatted, and I decided that I should honor my contract, and that's what my dad would want me to do, and so I came to Barkerville and learned how to get through my grief by performing, and this whole town embracing me helped me through it.
What were your thoughts of Barkerville?
Oh, I just loved it, Matt. I loved it. I loved it. Oh, I mean, when I first drove through Devil's Canyon, that was just happened to be one of those years that was really snowy, and I drove through, and I just like, wow, this is it was unbelievably beautiful and wintry. I just about, yeah, I was pretty stunned by it, but I wasn't. Some people get to Wells and Barkerville and kind of just maybe think that they've, I don't know, maybe they think they're scared of it, or they don't, just because it's not what they expected or not what they want, maybe. But having grown up a lot of years on Salt Spring, coming, spending a lot of time in small towns, I fell in love with it. I would say pretty much immediately. I would say immediately. I loved it. Yeah, and the theater and everybody was so kind, I was delighted to be working, here I was, I'd spent the 10 years of my sort of young life out of the business. The 10 years that are pretty important for young women, I had been out of the business. So now I'm back in the business, in the mid 30s, and bagged a professional contract. So I was over the moon. Over the moon.
And so you just did one season with Eureka Theater Company.
No,
which
two.
is
Two.
You did two. Okay, come on. So you were there 1999 and 2000.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
you did 2 years.
Mhm.
Then afterwards, because I'm trying to get to, how did
Yeah.
you get the gig at the Singing Camel? Or is it the
Okay.
Singing Camel?
Yeah. You
It's
mean the casino, or you mean Richard's place?
No, the casino's
The
place.
casino.
What's the casino?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, what happened with that was that after 2 years with Eureka Theater at Theater Royal, I decided, okay, I've done this, and now I do need to move on and do something else. So I went back down to the coast and did some work at a comedy review restaurant called Maz and Me's, which was not my milieu at all, but I did it. This
Wait,
is
wait,
where
wait. Was it like a stand-up comedy restaurant?
yeah, man, it'd be up your alley. Totally
That's
up your alley.
that's not
I
your
was.
scene though.
It's not my
Is it?
scene, but it was
No.
They did musical variety shows with stand-up comedy too.
Oh, okay. So,
Okay. And it was a restaurant where people came with big parties, and they had lots to eat and tons to drink. And
oh,
you were supposed to do impressions, and you did, dancing and singing. That part's fine. The musical theater part of it, but the stand-up stuff and that whole world was obviously, as you know, yeah, completely alien to me. And I was supposed to do impressions. And I'd never done an impression in my life. So, and because unfortunately I am even at that time, I was sort of seen like, oh, Miss Goody Two Shoes, or I had more barriers maybe about my performance than I do now. So, I had trouble going to the places where they wanted me to go for their clientele, let's say, for their patrons. Like, they would do anything to get a laugh, like anything. I mean, almost
mm,
anything.
yeah.
Like just this toilet bowl humor, anything stuff. And I would just be kind of horrified, going, you want me to do what? You want me to sit on this guy's lap and take my chest and like rub his face in my, you want me to do,
Uh,
oh my gosh. I don't know if I
See
could
the
do
way,
that. Like,
and it's funny because the way I always pictured the Theater Royal when I was working there is that you were like Margaret Dumont. Is that you had from a Marx Brothers movies, and some people will get that reference. Is that it's not all the time. You'd still fall in love with Groucho, which I would always consider as Richard, with the king of the one-liners, but you'd still have this affection towards him. But you were always Margaret Dumont was never like uptight through the whole movie. She just was
no.
uptight about certain things. The jackanapes they hired, which would be like myself, Nick Fontaine, Marcello, all these like scoundrels that you'd have running around you, and McKaylee doing their bad things.
Oh my
And you
God.
just would sit there, and I always pictured it, especially, and then after, it's funny because we then realized that you weren't Margaret Dumont, you were actually just as silly as us, but
Absolutely.
you were going to go the silliness of
A
physical
different
humor
way.
that we were going to go.
Right.
But that's how I always pictured you. And in fact, I even wrote a script called Night at the Theater Royal about casting you as Margaret Dumont
You never
esque
told me this,
character.
Matt. Oh my
No,
god, I
I've never
love
told
that.
that. I
That's
wrote the script. I
great.
pitched it to Richard, and it was like essentially it was like Night at the Opera, but
Hilarious.
redo. But we veered way off
Way
course,
off,
and now
way
we're
off.
gonna steer back
Steer
onto the
back.
road.
Yeah.
Uh,
So shall I just
so
jump in? Or-
let's just jump in right
Sure.
into coming back to
Casino?
Wells.
Yeah.
Coming
So
back
coming
to
back.
coming back to yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So what happened was that after the year at this comedy club that I didn't fit into at all, it closed down. So there you go. I lost my job, and it was just as well because I wasn't that good at it. But that's okay because I learned I didn't want to do that. So that's okay. And then Pat Taylor called me and said that they were going to be opening a casino in Wells, and would I like to come to a callback, and very pretty likely would I be part of the show, hopefully, if I went through the callback, and it was successful. And I said, I just might like to do that. That could be really fun to come back to Wells. So I went to the callback and met my two co-stars, and they cast us all kind of on the spot. It all just happened. So that's how, so really since 1999, I've been here every year except one. So there was one summer I wasn't
Wow.
here, and that was 2001. 2002, I was at the casino when it first opened, when Eureka ran the contract. And that's when I first met Richard.
And so, if you listen to, for everybody who hasn't listened to episode 5, please do stop, listen to Richard Wright's episode, and then come back to us, because Richard Wright tells a story about meeting you,
Mhm.
and he's doing it in a very typical Richard fashion. What were your thoughts of Richard coming up to you and talking to you about? Because it's not like there was the way that I've always got the sense from both of you, it's just very much like somebody to hang out with, because and that's how I always got the sense. He's like, oh, like this is somebody I can have a conversation with. Richard approaches you. Let's take us into you first meeting Richard Wright at the casino.
The casino. Okay. Yeah. Well, it was like during one of our shows, I think, actually. And even in like right during the show, I mean, because we would sing one of our songs. Each of us had a ballad, and we would sing and go out into the audience and sing. So I think, oh no, actually, sorry, back it up to the story that he tells, but my version, it's almost the same. Opening night of the casino show. My bosses are still, Mike and Pat, and they said to me that the guy that's going up to talk right now is going to give an opening night speech, and it's Richard Wright. And I looked at Mikey and I said, Richard Wright? Are you? Oh, is this the Richard Wright that's also been like an author? Is that? And he goes, yeah, he wrote the book about Barkerville. And I'm like, oh my God, you got to take me over. I got to meet this guy. So he said, well, he's just right over there. He's just, So Richard gave a speech, and then so I went up to him and I said, you're Richard Wright? And he goes, I think so. I said, you're the Richard Wright that's written all the Backroads books? Because, okay, so I should just backtrack to say that during that period when I was living in the Fraser Valley and doing my whole gardening life away from show business, my partner at the time, he and I used to go backroading, and we always used the books written by Richard Thomas Wright. So I had known about
Wow.
Richard Thomas. Yeah. Crazy, right? Correct? So I knew about Richard Thomas Wright's writing for ages and really admired it, that these backroad books were they weren't just kind of like, oh, go here, take a turn off, blah, blah, blah. They were full of personality. They were full of his personality, and the way he was able to describe atmosphere and the sense of place. I found his books really riveting, even though they were, just a backroad book, So I say to him, are you the Richard Wright that wrote the Backroads books? And he looks at me and goes, you don't look old enough to have read my books. And I said, trust me, I'm old enough. So it was just quite remarkable because, I'd known of his work for such a long time. So yeah, anyway, so sometime later through that summer, he came in one time and just said, would you like to have a drink after? And it's true that he's right. Like initially I sort of it was during one of my songs. I was just singing my song, and then he goes, "Hey, after the show, do you want to have a drink?" I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Let me think about it." So he thought I was putting him off and being cagey, and I was really, it's only just that we had such an intense schedule, and I was always preserving my voice. You remember me, Matt, always like, "Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I can't do
Yep.
this. I got to look after my voice." I'm less like that now. In fact, you'll hear my voice is a little hoarse because we had the cabaret last night, and I've had a third.
And
This is my Friday night, so I've had 13
and,
show a week, and yeah,
and you're also up with me, and it's 11. This is a sort of
yeah.
unheard of. I'm sort of surprised I was able to get you, but it's
Oh
10:30 at night.
well,
And when you said you were able to talk
oh
this late in the night, this I
sure.
was a bit taken back by it.
Oh well, I'm a night
Um,
owl, Matt. And if you didn't know that about me, I'm usually up till
oh,
no, usually 12 or 1, pretty
wow.
much.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So
Um,
yeah. So
so
yeah. Fast
so
forwarding to the
opportunity.
theater.
Fast forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Opportunity arises
Yeah.
to bid on to get the Theatre Royal.
Yeah.
Um, was there a lot of like, you know what? Let's just do this and see where it takes us, or was because right now you are operating on your 13th season.
I know it's
Would
unreal.
you ever believe at that moment that you signed that piece of paper that you'd be taking that far of a journey with the Theatre Royal?
I suppose the answer is no. Unlike some people, I'm not a big planner, Matt. I know that you're supposed to in this life. You're supposed to plan ahead and, look towards this and get these and do goal setting and where do I want to be in 5 years? I have to admit that I don't really do that. I allow experiences to affect me and change me and come along. Not saying I don't go after things, but
Of
I
course.
yeah, but I just so no, I Richard said to me, "What do you think about operating the Theatre Royal?" And I said, "Are you crazy? Why would I want to do that?" I said, "I've never been a boss. This sounds like an awful lot of work and not a lot of fun to me." And here we are. Because, oh, what I want to say about Richard, remember your
Yes.
show, "'Tis a Grand Adventure"? That's
Yeah.
what life is like with Richard Wright. Life is one big grand adventure with Richard Wright. And most of the adventures are good. Not always, but mostly. So so he'll say, "We should do this." And I'll go, you sure about that?" Like, that sounds crazy. But okay.
Your journey with the Theatre Royal.
Yeah.
So you started with a one-woman show, and
Yeah.
then in 2008 you joined,
That's right.
which I always felt was like, that's the way it should work, is that you joined
Yeah.
the full cast
Yeah. Yeah.
production.
Yep.
And also I say that because it means that I was able to write a one-man show for you guys and perform on stage.
Absolutely. Which was
But
so
I will just
great.
say that.
So great.
And so you hopped on stage, and then you
And
went
that was
from,
such a turning point for me, Matt. Oh my gosh.
and it was a turning point, really, I think, for the Theatre Royal as
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it always was seemed funny to me that like you were the musical director, you're one of the producers, and you're performing by yourself.
Yeah.
In which, why, it's like having your strongest player on your hockey team just shooting pucks against the wall while everybody else
Oh,
plays a game.
that's
And
funny.
I'm not saying that I don't mean that in a sense of that you're just shooting pucks against walls, a useless motion. What
No,
I'm
no.
saying is that it's a solo act,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so when you join the company, I was like, oh, that's, of course, why wouldn't it's been sitting there the whole time.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Um,
Yeah. Well,
a-
a couple of people said that to us actually, that I should be part of the main company. So Richard's brother was one. He said, "Yeah, Amy should be in the main show." So when we had
mhm.
Motherlode go out on tour and you do the one man, all that stuff fell together, and then Jim joined us as MD, so I didn't have to do it anymore. Jim Hodgkinson, and so
Yeah.
because I was never really much of an MD anyway. I've always called myself more of a facilitator than I don't have really the skills to be a musical director that much. I can have the overarching ideas, but when it comes right down to the nitty gritty, you need somebody with more skills than I have on that.
So we talked plenty about so I want to mention that you do Bone Picker with
Mm-hmm.
Richard, which is a
Yeah.
traveling videography series.
Yeah.
And it's you can
Incredible.
read more about it at www.bonepicker.ca.
Mm-hmm.
Richard discusses it at length in
Yeah.
his episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to mention it. However, it's very clear that you love your family. It's very
Yeah.
clear just in the conversation.
Yeah.
Your family's a big piece.
Oh, huge.
Can you fit before we call it a day here? Do you have a favorite story about doing theater as a family? Do you have or like
Oh.
doing as performing as a band? Was there like a story that always sticks out in your head of like this is what it feels like for all of us to be together?
Oh.
You know?
One of the shows that I worked on with in the 90s, it was actually the last show that my dad did before he died. So, of course, we didn't know that then, but it was about a year before he died. And we, as usual, we got together. There was my mom, my dad, me, my sister Sue, and her daughter Lauren. Patrice was very little then, so yeah, she was in it too. I think had a small part. But and then our band group and a couple of other friends. The gentleman that I used to be with a long time ago, Patrick, and the rest of our bandmates that did this show together. Oh yeah, and Kevin too. Yeah, we all got together and said, let's do a show and let's throw some ideas out, and we did. And Susie and I had gotten really involved, really in love with the Broadway composer Stephen Sondheim, and just in brief, he's one of those composers that some Broadway people really love him. Lots of people don't care for him because it's not the kind of music that you can just kind of walk out of the theater singing. Anyway, it's just a kind of a cute story in that my dad really hated Stephen Sondheim. So we sat around the family house saying, well, what are the songs we want to do? And Susie and I are like, we want to do a song from Into the Woods. Yeah, that great show. And I said, oh, and I want to do a song called Everybody Loves Louie from Sondheim's show Sunday in the Park with George. And my dad's going, oh my God, you want to do Stephen Sondheim? So it's just kind of cute because even though Dad didn't like him at all, he suffered, and we did like these just wonderful scene from Into the Woods with this, and Dad learned this whole stuff that he didn't like. Mom loved it. Mom was always more open-minded about music than Dad was. That's funny. Like Dad was very just totally jazz is his thing, and that's what he loves, and Mom would embrace everything. She was just very, very open about that. So she was never a great, okay, this is good. She was never like, and she was the first one to say, she was never really a terrific piano player. People thought that she was, but she wasn't really. She learned to play by ear, and she could accompany anybody. She could make some community person who really hardly ever sung before sound like $1 million by knowing exactly where they were going to go vocally. She was so good at that. She made people shine, right? So she took this song, this Stephen Sondheim song called Everybody Loves Louie, which is written in the key of B natural. It's a real bitch, if I may say. Hard to play.
Whoa!
Maybe should we take that out?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
It's a real B. It's fine.
A real B.
You're fine.
Okay.
It's
really
just
hard
that you
to
and
play.
Richard are both making this show like PG. I mean, come on.
Anyway, so she took this song and she said to me, now I don't really read the way Sondheim writes. I can't read this, that. It'll take me forever to actually learn exactly to play what he has written here. It's so complicated. But I know where he's going. I know where he's going. So she was really great at that. She could just distill from this complicated score what Sondheim was after, and she played her facsimile of that. But she also asked me in a couple places, she said, do you mind if we just transpose this into a slightly easier key for me to play? I said, fine. Anyway, she was just amazing that way. And so it's just kind of cute because she was all over doing it. And my dad just was like, even on the old videotape that we did of the show, you can see my dad grimace when he says, well, okay, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do another song by Stephen Sondheim. And he just grimaced while the rest of us came out there and just sang our hearts out in stuff that we loved, and he didn't like it. Anyway, that's one story. The only other one I might just tell is just kind of poignant because it was after they were both gone, and 2 years ago, 3 years ago, my mom died, And so, now we are, as Richard would say, by the time you lose both your parents, you become orphans. Sort of, it's a kind of a strange thing. You've got no one to turn to anymore. Anyway, my sister Sue, amazing Sue, organized a celebration of life for my mom's life 3 years ago, and luckily she was able to do it when we had a couple days off, so I didn't have to miss any shows up here. I could just fly down for 2 days and then come back. And Richard, beautiful sweetheart, he paid for my airplane ticket, my seaplane ticket, because it was going to be so expensive to get to Salt Spring fast enough in 2 days. Anyway, so we had this celebration of my mom's life, and it was glorious. Even though it was sad, Matt, it was also glorious because all of us were in this beautiful theater called Art Spring, celebrating my mom and dad too, by extension. And we all went up and we read. I actually read a poem, and we didn't even know my mom had written poetry, but Susie found some poems that my mom had written. And we didn't know she'd done it. They were closeted away in her secretary, So I read one of her poems, and then we sang some songs. Susie had organized all these different musicians came up and just played songs and celebrated mom and dad. And then we sang their songs up on that stage together. And my sibs and I just, my brother Bruce, who used to be, he's a great pianist, but he doesn't play as much anymore. And my brother Paul, who's a bass player, and my sister Wendy, she also sings sometimes. And Susie and me and Lauren and Patrice. And we just all got up there and sang mom and dad's songs. And oh man, it was just really, really moving. And I mean, it's not arrogant to say that on Salt Spring, within a certain circle of people, my mom and dad were icons of the theater community on that island. As I say, not saying the whole island, but for people that followed theater and justice, social justice and stuff, my mom and dad were really incredible people, and so we were celebrating them, and it was a remarkable night to sing their songs and just remember them. And that's how. So I just sort of feel like that's every day that I'm doing what I do at Theatre Royal. I am like mom and dad are in me coming out. That's how I express it, how I feel them within my life. Does that make sense?
Wow. No, it does. I appreciate you telling me that story. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome, Matt.
Well, Amy, that's we're gonna be talking more in the future. I want to do like a little bit of a round table with you and Richard.
Oh yeah.
Live, set up a little microphone and just have us a little chat and record that. I think would be fun.
Oh yeah, because we didn't get the bone paper. Well, next time, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Richard discussed bone picker.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I think he and it's also too. It's not saying that you're not a part of it or anything like that. It's that I went a little bit longer on his episode to make sure that got placed.
Absolutely.
Then your episode, we can just focus on more of the things that I know that it's going to take a little bit longer to talk about, which is theater, your family, things like that I want to talk to you about. And we barely touched the surface with you about Theatre Royal.
It's a great start, though. I'll just say
it's a great start.
I love it, and I'll just say, the lifestyle here, Barkerville, this world. And people say, why do you want to be an actor? Why do you want to? And I just say, because one life is not enough, Matt. One life is not enough. I want to be all these other people too, and experience it and tell these stories at Barkerville. I just want to say that. Because
I appreciate that.
That's how important it is. It's everything to me.
Well, Amy, I want to thank you for coming on to History Town. I really appreciate you, especially this late hour. Because of all our schedules of trying to organize, and the cabaret was on Tuesday, and I thank you very much, and also for being patient while I got delayed and coming back from Newfoundland, and I want to thank you for being on the show. You're a pretty amazing person, and I'm glad we can sit down and have this conversation. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Let me just say also, Matt, that we still miss you. And we could give you, we would find a job for you in a minute if you ever, we talk about you a
Uh,
lot. And you are a huge, still a big part of us. You helped make what
w-
Theater Royal is, Matt. I love
well,
you.
I love you guys, and you know that. And
Yeah, really
uh, yeah,
a big
yeah.
person to us,
Um,
big important
and
to
trust
us.
me,
Yeah,
I think about every year on May. I always think about you guys. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you for
well,
having me on,
uh,
Matt. It's just such a pleasure to. I just can't believe I
I
missed you when
think
you were here in May, though. It just breaks my heart
I
that I
know.
missed you. Oh,
O-
heard about it later. I'm like,
okay.
what? Anyway,
Well, you have a good night, Amy.
you too, Matt. Mwah.
History Town is made possible by hard work, dedication, and man hours of James Douglas and Dirk Van Stralen. Also, I'd like to send out a special thank you to my lovely wife Genevieve Quick and to my parents Debbie and Cyril Quick. Also, History Town would like to thank its special guest, Amy Newman of the Newman and Wright Theatrical Company, located in beautiful Barkerville. Well, that's it for this week's episode of History Town. Next week, we're going to be having on a very special and awesome person, and that is Christina Patterson. Christina Patterson was the school teacher in Barkerville in 2006, 2007, and sporadically in 2008, 2009, 2010. Also, she has performed many shows in the Wells and Barkerville area. It's going to be a great conversation. And now, a special treat. As we grow as a podcast, more and more people offer music, and luckily, the person I interviewed in this episode writes and performs her own songs. So we have a song from Amy Newman that is titled Leaving Home. That's it for me, folks. Have a great week. Good day, everyone.
How can I leave this place so soon? Highway is a ribbon of slate as it curls and twists away. How can I leave this place so soon? Aging town of wood and water beckons me to stay. My home is here now. Where will I be when the snows begin to fall? I will be far away from here, far away from here. How can I leave this place so soon? Golden Creek is a ribbon of sparkle, o'er the rocks it rushes along. How can I leave this place so soon? Autumn sun shining and warm, it won't last long. My home is here now. Where will it be when the snows begin to fall? Oh, where will he be? I will be far away from here, far away from here. How can I leave all that I love here? Like a magnet pulling me in, hooked like a fish on a line.
can I leave all that I love here? City lights, how they will surround me, but I'll be just fine when the snows begin to fall. I'll be just fine, far away from here. I will be far away from here.